Hello YouTube, today we're talking rest days. There are 3 videos I want to make about that topic. The first one is this one where I'm going to globally introduce the aspect of programming that rest days represent. Afterwards, I want to make a big recap where I'm going to talk about rest days for every single training template, so push-pull leg, full body, all of that stuff, but this one is going to be late because I want to review every single style first. And the third one that might come sooner is going to be talking about the psychological aspects of rest days and the benefits they can have that are not strictly correlated with volume and intensity. So for today, I'm not going to insult your intelligence and tell you what a rest day is. I am just going to try and put the context of the rest day within the programming realm so that you think about it differently. To me, a rest day is not something you use to just take a break. It's not for that. There's a different appellation for that. For me, a rest day is something that is programmed. So if you take an impromptu day off and you skip a day, for example, that's not a rest day. That's a skip day. It's different. The difference is a rest day is something that is just as important as a day of training. Why? Because it's time you're going to be spending growing. And if that day was not there, if it was taken off of the program, it would throw the entire thing in a complete chaos. So that's the difference. And so when you think about this, you're going to approach the programmation of a rest day with that in mind. It's not just something that needs to be given to you at some point because you're burnt out. Because if you're burnt out, it means that the programming is not right. A rest day should give you just enough recovery abilities to make the full extent of your gains, get back to the gym, keep your performance high, keep the progression going, and that's very important, and keep the tonnage stable. So with all of that in mind, this is what I talk about when I talk about a rest day. It's a model within the program, okay? And you're going to see that just like with any type of template, it can switch because if you, for example, have a program that's 8 days, that's only 7 days in a week, the rest day could potentially move around depending on where you want it to go. For me, for example, my rest day is Sundays, which means that since I have a static rest day, the rest of the program, which is 8 days, as I just said, is going to have to move. So the program is never going to be on the same days every single week. There's going to be rotations, but the rest day never rotates. That means one thing. It means that it's going to be different in terms of volume and intensity recovery depending on the week I'm in. That means also a thing. It means that in terms of control of the program, I need to be sharp because I could potentially have days before the rest day that are going to be much harder than others. And that to me should be lower body days. The days that you should give yourself the most rest from are the lower body. Why? Because usually you use more weight, so you accumulate more tonnage, you accumulate more fatigue. Lower body days tend to be more cardiovascular demanding, so you're going to be more tired. And overall, if we talk about tendons and a tendency to potentially be a little bit beat up, I do think that squats and deadlifts are going to be the main culprits. Doesn't mean that it's an excuse for poor form, but it's going to give you an incentive for spending the maximum amount of time you can not training. So that is going to be the timing of the rest day. Within the training, where do you want the rest day to fall? You don't want the rest day to fall after only 1 day of training, unless you have a good reason for that. But we're going to talk about that when we talk about the templates. Here, I also want to discuss with you in terms of rest days, the length of the rest day, because a lot of people are going to just say, oh, it's 24 hours, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you want to train morning and sometimes nights, a rest day could also be half a day, or it could be a full day plus half a day. And in which case, you also have to keep in mind the volume and intensity. Bottom line is, a rest day is an investment. The time you spend in the gym is of course crucial and your training is the most important thing. But the recovery aspect is just as important because it's what allows you to keep repeating training sessions and forever progress. So that's where the rest days come in, right? It's a token that is going to allow you to continue training. And it needs to be utilized that way. If you find, for example, that taking a rest day breaks your rhythm, then in that case, you might have to rethink the way you approach recovery, because you can potentially not have a rest day. That is an option, just like the option of having one exists. Is it possible to train 7 days a week with no break? Yes. Some people will tell you, no, it's stupid, but in reality, as I explained, a rest day, there's nothing magical about 24-hour breaks. It's just time you don't spend training, and it leaves your body with more room to grow and repair, because you're not pushing it into damaging more muscle fibers so that it has to repair it again. It gets some time off, but you can replicate the same exact effect if you reduce volume and intensity. You can replicate the same exact effect if you shorten a session, or if you lengthen the times between two sessions, because just as I said with the timing of the session, you can have no rest day, have a session on Tuesday morning and another one on Wednesday night. You still gave yourself more than 24 hours to rest. So you still didn't get a full 48 hours, but it's still more than what you would have usually gotten. And that's also where the entire thing of the rest day being 24 hours becomes interesting, because in reality, it's not 24 hours, it's 48, because you train, then you have the rest day, and the timing session of the training period falls within the rest day, then there's another day where you train. So you get that 48 hours because the rest day expands past it. As far as time periods to recover from, why would we do 48 hours? That's also an interesting question to ask yourself. You don't have to abide by that. Sometimes it's just more convenient in terms of scheduling. For me, it works fine, so I keep doing it. But you can approach that from different angles if you find that it just doesn't work for you. And I don't want to delve too much into the psychology behind rest days too, but you will find that for some people, having a multitude of rest days within the week is going to be more efficient. And for some people, it won't. And the only way to approach that is going to be the physical reactions of your body through progression, through recovery, the way your tendons feel, and the psychological aspect. But your body will be an excellent guide, because it will tell you exactly what's up. And I want to end the video on this. Of course, the more rest days you take, the more you reduce your ability to spread volume and intensity throughout the week, the more you could even potentially create what I call a tonnage ceiling, where you are basically artificially impeding yourself in terms of tonnage accumulation, just like people who say, I just want to train for an hour. Well, great, that's great and all, but now you just created limits where your tonnage has to exist within a window of an hour, and you basically refuse to make that limit flexible. So now volume and intensity manipulation has an inflexible limit, and that is a big problem, because flexibility, as you'll see in programmation, is key. So the more days you're going to block and say that's a rest day, those are also blockers. Those are also things that are going to prevent you from manipulating the amount of tonnage you get. So I do think that there is an extent to which this becomes really counterproductive. If you take 4 rest days a week, that starts to be a bit much. But it also depends on how you pack the rest days, because, for example, I do think that training for 3 days and then taking 4 days of rest and then training for 3 days is not optimal, right? On the other hand, training for 1 day, then resting, 1 day resting, 1 day resting, that's much better. And you could even do, as I said, for the 4 days, 2 days of resting after the 3 days of training, if you finish on a very heavy lower body day. Those are much more possible. Why? Because when we talk rest day, when we talk recovery, we speak about tendons, we mostly speak about gains. And if you think about protein synthesis and the amount of time we usually like to give ourselves to fully recover and be able to hit the muscle again, to break the muscle fibers and get those gains again, which is basically natural bodybuilding. It's that cycle of breaking and repairing non-stop that you want to repeat as much as you can. All of that is going to come into play when we program the rest days. So now I've laid the foundation. I don't think I taught you anything, but it's going to be really important, because when I make that video talking about rest days for every single template, I'm going to go speedy in it because the introduction is here. And since I want to start really talking about the recovery aspects of natural bodybuilding and frequency, which is one of the 3 pillars of programmation I haven't really spoken about much, but that is super important, it's going to have to be said first. So I'm going to leave you with that. Let me know in the comments how you program rest days, what you think about rest days, and have a good day.